He wasn't just a TV character. Don Knotts was a comedic force who could light up the screen with a single nervous glance or awkward grin. As the bumbling yet endearing Deputy Barney Fife on the Andy Griffith Show, he became a household name, defining an era of wholesome American television. His timing was razor-sharp, his delivery flawless, and his charm irresistible. But behind that unforgettable smile was a man with struggles, secrets, and stories his fans never saw, stories that, decades later, his daughter is finally ready to tell. Don Knotts wasn't just a star, he was a national treasure. His portrayal of the lovable, jittery Deputy Barney Fife on the Andy Griffith Show didn't just win him 5 Emmy Awards, it etched him permanently into the hearts of millions. With unmatched comedic timing, a nervous charm that felt genuine, and expressions that could brighten even the darkest day, Knotts became more than an entertainer. He was a companion in living rooms across America, a source of comfort, and a reminder that laughter could be the purest kind of joy. Yet, even for the man who could make the world laugh until it cried, life had moments far heavier than any script could capture. In 2006, those closest to him faced one of those moments. As Don's health failed, the hospital room fell silent except for the faint beeping of machines. His daughter Karen sat beside him, gripping his hand as if her strength could hold him here just a little longer. Every breath he took was a reminder that time was slipping away. She didn't leave his side, not for a second, determined to be the anchor he had always been for her. And then, in a fragile voice, with eyes still holding the warmth the world knew so well, Don shared a truth he had carried quietly for a lifetime, a truth so raw and unexpected, it would forever change the way she remembered her father's life and legacy. The words were so profound and intimate that she kept them hidden for many years. Now, at 71, Karen Knotts unveils the deepest secret of her father. Before Don Knotts became America's cherished jittery comedian, winning 5 Emmys with his anxious charm, his true story began in the shadows of a difficult childhood. Born Jesse Donald Knotts in Morgantown, West Virginia. He was the unanticipated youngest child in a broken home. His mother, Elsie, was 40 at his birth. His father, William, once a skilled farmer, was now struggling with alcoholism and schizophrenia. Just weeks prior to Don's arrival, the family lost their farm, taking with it their sense of security. Home was not a refuge. William's mental illness frequently erupted into violence. Don recalled instances when his father threatened him with a knife. To escape the terror, Don retreated into his imagination, creating a realm where laughter was safer than the harshness of reality. His older brothers, Willis, William, and Ralph Sid, were significantly older and heavy drinkers like their father. Despite their cruelty, Don looked up to them, particularly Sid. Sid possessed a natural talent for humor that illuminated even the darkest areas of their troubled home. Yet, tragedy struck again. Sid passed away unexpectedly from an asthma attack, a loss that devastated Don. From that moment on, in his desperation, Don sought solace in something unconventional. A ventriloquist dummy named Danny. Danny, his ventriloquist dummy, became his initial audience, his first companion on stage, and the start of a lifelong passion for performing. Through small skits with Danny, Don discovered bravery, humor, and a means to navigate the world around him. In high school, he began to flourish. Quiet yet sharp-witted, he was well-liked and even became class president. Don, however, still felt little, skinny, destitute, and out of place beneath the grins. But he couldn't deny the purpose the platform provided him. Don traveled to New York City to pursue show business at the age of 18, armed only with a suitcase, his dummy, and a dream. The city, however, wasn't nice. The truth of rejection struck him hard after his first audition failed. His heart was damaged but not broken when he got home. Ironically, he gained his first genuine audience in the U.S. Army during World War II, where he enrolled shortly after. Don learned the therapeutic value of laughter while performing in Army variety shows and using humor to uplift troops' spirits. He came home from the battle feeling inspired and resolved to keep going. He joined Phi Sigma Kappa to hone his public speaking abilities after enrolling at West Virginia University and graduating with a degree in education and a speech minor. The child who used to hide behind a dummy was gradually taking center stage. Don Knotts' path to fame took an unexpected detour during World War II while serving in the U.S. Army. Don did not use a weapon in combat between 1943 and 1946. He laughed as he struggled. He was assigned to the 6,817th Special Services Battalion and performed in Stars and Gripes, a military variety performance that was intended to raise spirits, around the Pacific. He provided tired men with something to cheer about in the midst of the conflict amid tense and open fields. Don wasn't playing a joke. He served with distinction. By the time of his release, he had received honors such as the Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal with 4 Bronze Stars, the Philippine Liberation Medal, and the World War II Victory Medal. The Army provided him with discipline, a sense of purpose, and the first genuine taste of what an audience could mean to someone who had once fled a challenging upbringing in West Virginia. Don returned to West Virginia University after the war with renewed self-assurance. He was no longer merely a pupil. He was a performer and a veteran. He made the most of his time on college, performing frequently and honing his comedic timing. He also fell in love during this time and married Catherine Metz, which provided much-needed stability. Don returned to New York City with a degree in education and a minor in speech. He wasn't an unknown hopeful, either, this time. Through his military ties, he was able to secure small engagements and gradually make his way into the entertainment industry. On the radio show Bobby Benson and the B.B. Bar Writers, he provided the voice of Wendy Wales, a witty, quick-witted character who was a wonderful fit for Don's skills. Then, from 1953 until 1955, he was cast in the soap opera Search for Tomorrow. It put him on TV, but it wasn't a comedy. The Steve Allen Show had his big break in 1956. In mock interviews, Don, who had joined the cast, played a jittery, bug-eyed wreck. Characters that share his nervous disposition. Don had discovered his humorous voice, and the audience adored it. He was already developing a chemistry with Andy Griffith in the meantime. Don's frenetic energy was the highlight of Broadway's No Time for Sergeants, which they starred in from 1955 to 1957. He played the part again in the 1958 movie adaptation, giving a remarkable performance. Something unique was hinted at by the anxious test administrator he portrayed. It was more than a role. It was the start of one of the best comedy teams in American television history. At last, Don Knotts had shown up. Catherine Metz appeared to be the last person to fall in love with Don Knotts when they first met. Raised in tradition, she was thoughtful, well-mannered, and the daughter of a clergyman. Don, on the other hand, was a nervous, wary young guy who had a difficult childhood and a quick tongue full of sage advice. Although they appeared to be very different, love isn't always rational. Their differences did not dissuade Don. He actually leaned into them with warmth, humor, and an unwavering charm that had been refined over years of masking suffering with laughing. She was won over by him. Don was her choice after Catherine called off a prior engagement. They were married 2 years later. However, slowing down did not equate to settling down. The boyhood dream that started in his lonely room with just imaginary pals to keep him company was still with Don. He had more in mind than simply surviving. His goal was to shine. Don made another risky move in 1949, this time with his new bride by his side and with $100 in their possession. After leaving West Virginia, they went back to New York City, which had previously turned him away. Sadly, not much had changed. He was still passed over by casting agents. He was too unorthodox, too jittery, and too anxious. He lacked the confidence and leading man appearance that casting directors were looking for. Even his comedy, which had been polished on college campuses and on stages throughout the war, did not fit in with the city's fast-paced entertainment scene. However, Don persisted, motivated by a force greater than ambition. The need to transform his ineptitude into art and his suffering into meaning. Don Knotts' ascent wasn't quick. It was built on grit and was steady and gradual. Don made a light-hearted call in 1960 after spotting Andy Griffith in the pilot of a new television show. It appears that you require a deputy. That call altered everything, and Andy agreed. Don's legacy would be The Andy Griffith Show, and he would win 5 Emmys and be immortalized in American pop culture for his portrayal as Barney Fay. On film, Don was winning people over, but behind the scenes, things were falling apart. His chemistry with Griffith was effortless and iconic, like lightning in a bottle. His marriage to Catherine Metz, however, was struggling at home. Tensions apparently developed between her and Don, as well as Andy's wife, and she never felt comfortable in the social circle of the program. The gap between Don and Catherine grew as he threw himself into long, demanding days on set. The harm was done by the time their marriage ended, 13 years later, with 2 kids. Don believed he had all he wanted because of his fame. Achievement, fame, and a spot in Hollywood. But there was a price for it. Be it ambition, fatigue, or something more sinister. He might not have been the husband and father he wanted to be because of the same commitment that made him famous. Don Knotts was silently facing an internal storm long before he rose to fame on television. He was a man who was profoundly impacted by genuine worry, despite the amusement and endearing uneasiness he displayed on film. The dread was so great that even in his early years of performing in tiny venues, he would occasionally spend hours or even days in bed before going in front of a crowd. The nervous, fidgety figure he played was not far from the reality, which is what made people laugh on stage. It was more than just a show of nervousness. It reflected something far more substantial. By the 1950s, Don was using medicine to control his nervousness. However, reliance quickly turned into dependency, as was the case with many in Hollywood at the time. His difficulties grew as the demands of celebrity mounted. He became hypochondriac, persuading himself that he was seriously unwell when in fact he wasn't. He was overcome with fear of illness. He struggled with sleeplessness and depressing episodes. It started to impact everything. His connections, his work, and his identity. Don eventually sought professional assistance. Although therapy helped him a little, the harm was extensive. Desperate seeking a remedy he couldn't discover, he once broke down in a session and blamed God, haunted by the horrors of his early years and the weight of achievement. He had achieved all of his dreams thanks to fame. Money, fame, and praise didn't make the dread go away. The voice in his head telling him he wasn't okay was simply made louder by it. Don, who won 5 Emmys for his portrayal as Barney Fay on The Andy Griffith Show, excelled despite the chaos. However, his relationship with Andy Griffith and the show's popularity weren't enough to keep him there. Don started looking for alternative options after he thought the show would conclude after 5 seasons. He quit the show in 1965 after agreeing to a movie deal with Universal. Even though he occasionally made cameos, fans missed him terribly. Many thought that when he left, the show's magic diminished. His daughter claims that he was worn out by the never-ending grind of filming, but fatigue wasn't the only thing that made him go. Don Knotts was a man with unseen wounds that could not be completely healed by praise, prizes, or laughing. Off-screen, Don Knotts shocked many with his charm and allure, especially with ladies, despite playing the apprehensive, uncomfortable sidekick on screen. Don didn't shy away from romance despite the heartache of his first marriage. He actually plunged headfirst into the dating scene, quietly earning a reputation as a ladies' man in Hollywood. When the cameras stopped rolling, Don was far more assured than his characters, who were frequently clumsy and uncertain. However, success also brought ego, which began to manifest by the late 1960s. Don's career took a dramatic shift in 1969 when he starred in The Love God, a daring comedy about a mild-mannered magazine entrepreneur who transforms his company into a risque one. In contrast to Barney Fay, Don was portrayed in the role as a dapper, desirable bachelor. He enjoyed the opportunity to defy convention and demonstrate his ability to direct a picture with a strong message. However, viewers didn't buy it. The movie was a failure. Don's attempt to break his wholesome image didn't work, and many cinemas wouldn't show it. Don signed a big deal with Universal and concentrated on his film career, still keen to make his breakthrough as a starring man. He starred in a number of light-hearted comedies, including The Reluctant Astronaut and The Incredible Mr. Limpet. However, none could compare to the enchantment and praise of his television work. He sensed it. There wasn't quite as much applause. The spotlight isn't as cozy. He started a variety show called The Don Knotts Show in 1970 to highlight his diversity. Although there were great expectations, the presentation was swiftly overshadowed by the competitors and faded. It served as a sobering reminder that fame on television does not necessarily translate into longevity in other contexts and that success does not always repeat itself. Don appeared to calm down, at least somewhat, after 10 years of pursuing celebrity and balancing relationships. Laurie Chuckna, a woman who remained mostly hidden from the public, was the object of his second love. The increasing toll on Don's life was unavoidable, even though their relationship remained largely clandestine. Don Knotts should have finally been able to breathe when he had found a more stable rhythm, his career humming quietly along, his love life appearing secure. However, the quiet was short-lived. Little clues started to appear. It became hard to read. Faces became hazy. It didn't feel comfortable to drive anymore. What started out as minor annoyances quickly turned into serious ones. Don received a tragic diagnosis when he eventually sought medical attention. Degeneration of the eyes. He was rapidly losing his vision. The thought of being blind was more than frightening for a man who had lived his entire life making faces that could steal a scene in front of cameras. It was existential. He was engulfed by the concerns. The news rocked Don to his very core, according to his ex-wife Laura Lee. He began to pursue unfulfilled aspirations, crossing items off what appeared to be a personal bucket list. But it all suggested terror rather than healing. The emotional toll didn't remain confined, and depression ensued. Those closest to him bore the brunt of it. Don and Laura Lee separated in 1983, having been together for almost 10 years. It wasn't simply the diagnosis, she later disclosed. It was the way it caused Don to break down. Their marriage was unable to withstand the fear of fading away and becoming invisible in multiple ways. Fortunately, Don had a lucky break when he had eye surgery that preserved his vision. It seemed for a second that he had deceived fate. But destiny was not finished. Smoking was a long-standing habit of Don's that resulted from the milieu of old Hollywood. It was too little, too late, even though he gave it up later in life, maybe when the risks were more obvious. In the early 2000s, medical doctors identified him with lung-most cancers. Still, Don faced it with the identical quiet resilience he'd constantly carried. He didn't percentage the severity of his contamination with his kids, selecting alternatively to guard them with laughter. After all, making human beings smile had been his life's motive. And even inside the face of something so grave, Don Knotts selected desire, believing he could beat the percentages one greater time. In 1987, while running at the sitcom What a Rustic, Don Knotts, then in his 60s, met a younger actress named Frankency Yarborough, employed to help him memorize strains. Although the show dwindled into obscurity, their assembly turned into existence converting. Regardless of their widespread age gap, they fell in love, and in 2002, they married. Frankency turned into drawn to his mild, prone spirit, but their time together became heartbreakingly short. With the aid of 2006, Don's fitness had declined hastily due to cancer complications. He spent his final days at home, nevertheless looking to hold spirits excessive. While he passed, Frankency, his wife of simply 4 years, turned into left with recollections and the fortune he left behind. If there was ever someone born to make the sector chortle, it changed into Don Knotts. Whilst his lifestyles neared its final chapter, he held tight to the gift that described him. Now not reputation, not the awards, no longer even Barney Fife, but the ability to boost spirits even in the darkest of hours. His daughter Karen Knotts remembered the one's ultimate moments now not with silence or solemnity, however with laughter. He become demise, she said. But he did or stated something that had me and my stepmom in hysterics. Overcome with emotion, Karen did something she now regrets. She stepped out of the room, now not out of grief, but because she became giggling so tough she did not need to do it in the front of her demise father. I notion, I cannot be guffawing even as he's slipping away, she pondered. However later, a director buddy gave her clarity. It is precisely what he could have wanted. She agreed. That turned into who Don become to the very give up. A person who observed joy in bringing joy. In an interview with M Television, Don himself admitted he by no means truly tried to be humorous. It wasn't something he found out. It became simply intuition, he said. Growing up in a chaotic domestic at some stage in the melancholy, humor turned into his getaway, his manner of surviving. He as soon as joked that he started pleasing imaginary audiences as a child because no person else become listening. However, over the years, the world did begin listening, and they by no means stopped. Karen defined her father's humor not as something crafted, but something embedded in his DNA. It changed into like breath for him, she said. He didn't rehearse his warmth or plan his punchlines. They surely flowed. It wasn't a performance. It became who he turned into. And that herbal attraction accompanied him into his final act when laughter became the parting present he gave to the ones he cherished most. Because the end grew near in 2006, one more acquainted discern re-entered the scene, Andy Griffith. Time and distance had induced a few glide among them since the Andy Griffith display, however that bond constructed through years of shared display time and real existence friendship by no means absolutely broke. When Don became hospitalized at UCLA Medical Middle, Andy got here to mention goodbye. In a quiet room, he sat together with his antique buddy. Don could not talk, but Andy spoke for both of them. I informed him I loved him, Andy shared in an emotional interview. And in a deeply personal contact, he known as Don with the aid of a name few ever heard. Jess, it was Don's start call, Jessie, but he had in no way preferred it. Andy, even though, used it with gentle affection, whispering, breathe, Jess. Hold respiration. In reaction, Don moved his shoulder. Diffused however unmistakable. He heard. He knew it was a farewell wrapped in silence and love. Now not lengthy after, the medical institution staff knowledgeable Don's spouse, frankency, that his coronary heart had stopped in the ambulance, but had been restarted. Still, his time changed into slipping away. On February 24, 2006, Don Knotts handed away at age 81. What remains isn't always just a filmography of unforgettable characters or a shelf full of accolades. It is something deeper. Don Knotts left in the back of the sound of laughter, the warmth of pleasure, and the reminder that even in lifestyle's saddest moments, humor can be a mild. His very last overall performance, just like his life, ended no longer in sorrow, however in shared laughter, and in that manner, he by no means actually left the level.